The NFL season is less than a month away. We just had the Hall of Fame game last night. Football is finally almost back. We've gone through all of our team predictions. We've gone all through the divisions. We've gone through some of our favorite player props, whether it's quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, or running backs. You can check out those videos. But now we're going to talk about the biggest what ifs ahead of the 2023 season. This is part one. We're looking forward to this series. There's a lot to go through, really. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty about last year that's carrying over to this year that really clouds what the future looks like for the 2023 NFL season. So there are a couple what if questions that I want to touch base on today that I think that really will pique the curiosity of those who are heavily vested in the NFL. Before we do that, make sure you drop your biggest what if ahead of the 2023 NFL season in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. We appreciate you guys being here. Let's get started with my first biggest what if of the NFL season. This one is more personal to me, but just because I am enamored by the situation. What if Russell Wilson and the Broncos' woes of 2022 were strictly coaching related? This has been a hot topic since the beginning of last year. We saw a steep decline in Russell Wilson's play. Obviously, I think he could have been considered a top 5 QB in the league at the Seahawks. I think nobody would have argued that grandstanding. I think he was a top 5 quarterback with the Seahawks. At least he looked like it. At least we believed that. And then he takes a hop over to the Broncos. And this, like, he was still in his prime. He was playing some of his best football when that transition happened. And then all of a sudden everything crumbles. Play calling was a disaster. Have their league bottom in efficiency and league bottom in plays that use motion formation change. And so then we have this drama with Sean Payton talking about how Nathaniel Hackett's offense he was pretty absolute about it. He said it was the worst offensive play calling that he's ever seen in his entire life. The scheme was just like some kindergartner drew it up himself with some crayons. So there's some drama there, and there's a lot of truth to it. I mean, we saw just absolute abysmal X's and O's, and it translated when we watched those games, especially in prime time. My goodness, how many times did we get the Broncos in prime time? And it was just the worst football that you could ever see. I remember the Thursday night game against the Colts, and it was honestly hilarious how bad that football game was. So I think that, let's take a step back here with Nathaniel Hackett. He is a horrible play caller. He's a horrible football coach. There's nothing really that he proved to be good at it, like as a head coach at the Broncos. And we have some of these Jets fans that come in and they're trying to back him up. Obviously, they want to because he's the Jets OC right now. But we have seen this situation before where an offensive coordinator really just gets lucky with being paired up with a Hall of Fame quarterback. And that's what Nathaniel Hackett's career is built on. He, his very first play calling OC role was with the Jaguars in the Blake Bortles era. We obviously know how that turned out, not well. Then he goes to the Packers. And there he gets with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Matt LaFleur is calling the plays. Aaron Rodgers is a quarterback. Of course you're going to have success. I could go in there and not do a single thing other than do some scouting, X's and O's type stuff. And, I could be considered a candidate for a head coaching job at that point. So Nathaniel Hackett was really elevated by those around him, by Aaron Rodgers, Matt LaFleur, and, those who were ahead of him in his coaching tree. And so when he was given the opportunity, he flopped. And we saw that with Adam Gase too. Like, Adam Gase is a perfect example. We saw him get paired up with Peyton Manning at the Broncos. Obviously, Peyton Manning, he's his own offensive coordinator. He's going to do his own thing, call his own plays. Everybody likes to attribute success towards Adam Gase. Then he gets hired in with the Jets. Bust. Awful, awful head coach. So we've seen this situation before. We've seen it, but when we look at those situations, We look at Nathaniel Hackett with Aaron Rodgers. We look at Adam Gase with Peyton Manning. Really strong quarterbacks seem to avoid any sort of decline with bad offensive coordinators due to them elevating their level of play. They're kind of offensive coordinator, proofed. They're like there's normally not an offensive coordinator or play caller that's going to bring their game down. It just won't make it any better. And so that's what makes me concerned about Russell Wilson and if the woes of the Broncos were strictly coaching related, because if Russell Wilson was the top 5 quarterback that we all once knew him as or thought we knew him as, then how come he didn't take things into his own hands and elevate the offense himself? That's my concern there. But we're asking the question is, what if the Broncos were strictly on Nathaniel Hackett, their error, their woes? And that means that Russell Wilson, let's say Sean Payton comes in here and fixes Russell Wilson and takes him to the level that he used to be at, puts him back in his prime. Say he fixes it. What does that do for the Broncos? Do they elevate themselves to being a contender for the AFC West? Can they take themselves to, being able to play with the Chiefs, with the Chargers, and contend for that division and make it to the playoffs? Do we think Sean Payton has the ability to do that? A lot of people, I've also seen the argument that Sean Payton, similar to Bill Belichick, was in a situation like the perfect storm. I don't think anybody's going to question his offensive play calling ability, but he did have the perfect storm, getting one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time paired with him as well. Now, did Sean Payton make Drew Brees? Did Drew Brees make Sean Payton? It's more likely a little bit of both, but I can hear the argument for either which way. And can Sean Payton do that to Russell Wilson? He's going to have to. He's going to have to basically clean slate Russell Wilson and everything that he learned last year. He's going to clean slate the entire offense and what they learned last year. And so if it was strictly coaching related, can Sean Payton turn around quick enough? Let's say he does. Are they immediate contenders? I think so. They have the best defense in the AFC West. There's no question about it. Nobody can argue that statistically. Nobody can argue that based on looking at the roster or the depth chart. Everybody knows that the Broncos has the best defense in this division. And so if the offense can elevate their level of play, and here's where the what if comes in. What if it was strictly coaching related and they return to form? If Russell Wilson returns to form, the Broncos are going to contend for this division, and they can easily make the playoffs. And so that to me is one of the cloudiest situations in the league, because nobody can answer that for sure. So my what if here is I like to think about if Sean Payton can fix everything, if Russell Wilson can clean slate everything he learned last year and return back to the form he was in with the Seahawks. I mean, they have the players to be able to do that, and they absolutely can be contenders for this division. They just, have to. There's going to be some remedy that has to go on that kind of mends this locker room. We know that there was a lot of locker room issues, a lot of just weird situations that the coaching staff of last year's Broncos let happen and bleed into a little bit in this offseason. So we hope that Sean Payton can clean it up. And it's an interesting hypothetical, because if the Broncos issues were strictly coaching related, then they bring in one of the best coaching staffs here. Why? Of course, they're contenders. They have to be considered contenders, because if they can clean up their offensive play, their defensive play was already best in the league, they can contend and they can be playoff. They can be in contention for the playoffs. They can be in contention for the AFC, and maybe Super Bowl is in sight. I'm not ready to put them there yet, but this is the what if game. I think they have to be considered as a really, really dangerous team this year, just due to the nature of what's going on coaching wise. So that was my big first what if. I'm really excited to see it play out, because there's so many different ways that this team can go. And I'm a big Sean Payton fan. I think he, kind of wears his heart on his sleeve. I've loved the drama going on this week between him and the Jets coaching staff and all of that drama that's ensued. It's had a little bit of spice in the offseason as we await for the first game. My second what if scenario of the season is what if Justin Fields actually elevates his game? A lot of people are expecting it, considering he is the most widely bet on MVP candidate and across all of the sports books. Considering he is now like the number 4 overall drafted fantasy quarterback. A lot of people expect this jump, and so there's kind of two sides to this. More so, people on the side that know or think that he will elevate his game, especially as a passer. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about the what happens if he does actually elevate his game. Uh, you know, I think he could be considered an MVP candidate if this happens. I think a lot of people already do consider him an MVP candidate. He has better weapons on the perimeter and an upgraded O line. He did come off 2022, in which he led the league in sacks. So last season, he was sacked 99 times. He led the league in sacks, and that was more attributed to poor offensive line play. They upgraded, especially in the draft. They drafted Darnell Wright in the first round. They acquired DJ Moore as a weapon. They acquired Chase Claypool. They still have Darnell Mooney. And this is something to be excited about because we saw what Justin Fields was able to do last year. But what if he elevates his game this year with the added weapons, with the added protection? I think that this is a very good team. This is a top 10, if not top 5 offense, if all goes well. The question is the defense. And now a lot of people think that if Justin Fields elevates his game, that the Bears are immediate playoff contenders, that they're immediately eyeing the Super Bowl. And I just don't think that's the case yet. Even if Justin Fields does make an improvement, their defense is so bad that it's going to hinder them throughout the entire season. They're dead last in DVOA. They gave up more points per game than any other team last season, and they allowed offenses to score on 41.8% of their drives, second worst in the NFL. And the only roster additions they made were a linebacker. They paid Tremaine Edmonds and they brought in TJ Edwards, which is fine. This is great that they're making those additions, but let's be real. Like, we know that for an NFL defense to excel, they need elite pass rushing and they need really solid defenders in the secondary. Obviously, linebackers, they're great too. They play an important role in guarding running backs out of the backfield in the receiving game, stopping the run game, commanding the offense. But we know that elite defenses are really driven by pass rush and the ability to blitz and then trust your guys in the secondary to be able to lock down a man one-on-one. So linebackers is really kind of a Band-Aid. It's not a full fix for this Bears defense. And so even if Justin Fields and company elevates their game, even if they excel this year, I think their defense is really going to hold them back. It won't fix the overarching issue of the Chicago Bears. But it's a fun what-if scenario because I think Justin Fields can be, the next Lamar Jackson type of quarterback. Truthfully, at Ohio State, he was known as a pocket passer. He didn't run the ball. So we know that arm talent is there. We know that it is in his wheelhouse to be one of the best, passers in the league. He was the best passer in the Big Ten, arguably the best passer in college football at one point. So it's in the realm of possibility. What if he elevates his game? It's an exciting scene. I think there's fireworks on the offensive side of the ball. They can definitely contend for the division. It's a little weaker this year without Aaron Rodgers, but I think their defense holds them back, and I still think that there's no way that they can get past that issue. So fun hypothetical, and I think that's where I leave it at, is like until they mend that defense, there's really no way they can get to the big dance. So it's fun though. I love Justin Fields, especially in fantasy football. He won me a ship last year, so props to him. I'm looking forward to drafting him again this year. Already got a little bit of him in best ball. Next one. What if Deshaun Watson returns to form? Talking about when he was with the Texans. This is one of my favorite ones, actually, because I think that I'm huge on the Browns. I think the Browns have an underrated roster, and I think they will kind of really make a big splash in the NFL under the radar. I think nobody's expecting them to come out and be a top five team, but I think that's definitely in their range of outcomes, assuming this hypothetical of Deshaun Watson returning to form happens. We know, some people. Let's remember how he was with the Texans. He was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. He led the league in passing yards. He led the league in yards per attempt, and led the league in yards per completion in his final year at Houston in 2022. Pat Thorman model has the third best offensive line attributed to the Browns this year. And they also have added talent in the receiving core. We know what Deshaun Watson can be. This is with the Texans, he had like DeAndre Hopkins, but the offensive line was not up to par. It was only DeAndre Hopkins. I think this Browns, they have an elite offensive line. They have a ton of weapons on the perimeter. They have Amari Cooper. They have Donovan People-Jones. They have Elijah Moore. They have all of these guys, David Njoku, Cedric Tillman they drafted. It's crazy. They have Nick Chubb in the backfield running the ball. If Deshaun Watson returns to form, I absolutely believe that the Cleveland Browns are a Super Bowl contender. I absolutely think they have the roster to do that. They have the defensive unit to be able to. It's not perfect, but they have an elite passing rush and they have a solid secondary. They have an amazing offense in terms of roster wise, and the coach, Kevin Stefanski, is a great play caller. Call it as is, one of the most efficient offenses in the league over the past few years with guys like Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. So if Deshaun Watson returns to form, absolutely, this is a top three offense, 100%. I think that the personnel is there, and I think if Deshaun Watson returns, because if he returns back to form, when he was with the Houston Texans, those last 2 years, 2021 and 2022, him and Patrick Mahomes, were back and forth as arguably the best quarterbacks in the league. Obviously, Mahomes has taken the next step to being the best quarterback in the league, but it was him and Mahomes, and that was it, And so he has the chance to elevate himself with Mahomes, with Burrow, with Josh Allen, and potentially overtake some of them. That is in his wheelhouse. That is in his range of outcomes. And so what if that happens? The Browns win the division. What if that happens? The Browns contend for the Super Bowl. They make a push in the playoffs and try to get to the big dance. Absolutely, that's possible, especially with the position that the Browns have put themselves in. Obviously, I don't agree with the accusations that were made against him. I think that I'm kind of pissed at the NFL the way that they handled that situation. I'm not a personal fan of Deshaun Watson, but strictly business and looking at him as a player, as a quarterback, and the talent that he has, I think he has a chance to be a top five quarterback in the league once again. That's a fun one. Last one. What if Tua plays all 17 games this year? What if that happens? The Dolphins last year had one of the most explosive offenses in the league. They led the league in pass rate over expectation with Tua at quarterback. They were a top five scoring offense with Tua at quarterback. And then when he left, they kind of fell off a cliff. They were still hanging around with teams, winning some games here and there. But what if Tua plays all 17 games? What if he did last year? We can think about it that way. What if he played all 17 games last year? They were Super Bowl team. I mean, playoff contender. And what's not to say the same thing this year? If Tua plays 17 games this year, if he plays all of them, the entire season, doesn't get hurt, where do they stand record wise? They play in one of the toughest divisions in the league. They play the Jets twice, they play the Bills twice. They're going to have to play some really, really tough opponents, but it doesn't matter because if they have Tyreek, they have Waddle. If Tua plays every single game and shows the same sort of explosiveness and the offensive capabilities that they showed in 2022, this team can really compete with anybody. I think that is a fact. I think one thing is for sure is that the Dolphins are, their defense is way better than it was last year. And their offense is at the same point it was last year. And Tua is the big question mark on the team. If he stays healthy, can they do it? Absolutely. What is their range of outcomes? With Tua, if Tua plays all 17 games, what is their range of outcomes? I feel like their floor is 8 wins with Tua playing everything, and their ceiling is 11 or 12. That's right up there with what the Chiefs did last year, with what the Bengals did last year. So they have that in their range of outcomes, and so the ceiling with Tua is just so much higher, and then the floor is almost the same, regardless who's at quarterback. I feel like the Dolphins are not going to lose. They're not going to drop under 500 really, no matter who's at quarterback. But Tua is the key to bringing them exceed double-digit wins, fight for that division, and be playoff contenders. And Tua is the key to that. He knows the offense better. He's the most talented quarterback on the roster. And I think that if he plays all 17 games, the Dolphins will be in a phenomenal spot. We saw what their offense was capable of doing last year. If they can just hold on to that success with Tua, keep Tua healthy, they're absolutely contending for the division, which, in a division that tough, absolutely means that they're playoff contenders. Absolutely means that they're eyeing the big dance. And so with their win total being at 8.5, 9, we talked about this in our show earlier a couple weeks ago. It's hard to be confident about it because do we know for sure that Tua is going to be healthy? No, we don't. But playing out the hypothetical that he does, I think that they are winning 11 plus or minus 2 games. I think absolutely they're if Tua plays all 17 games, they're absolutely clearing it over. But it's the key. Can we be certain that that's going to happen? Their offensive line is not that good. They didn't really make any upgrades from last year. So what if Tua plays all 17 games? They're in the playoff. Simple as that. I think that is the easiest answer for that hypothetical question. Now, can we say that they're Super Bowl contenders? I don't know. I don't think that their roster is quite there yet, but their coaching and their offensive skill set positions are there for sure. Having Tyreek and Jalen Waddle with Tua calling the shots, and then Mike McDaniels obviously being the coach, I think that it's a recipe for success if they continue to bolster their defense and then do something about the offensive line. So again, kind of capping off that what-if scenario. If Tua plays all 17 games, they're in the playoffs, but I don't think that they're capable of winning the Super Bowl. So I hope you guys enjoyed that segment with me. I'm going to continue doing these what-if questions. Make sure you drop some more questions in the comments, too. Give me some ideas. I love kind of playing these out in my head. It gives me something to do as I wait the NFL season, which is 3 weeks away. So couldn't be more excited. I appreciate you guys listening. I will be here next week.